Hey, what's up? I'm gonna have to do a part two of this, and it was kind of difficult. I made a couple of vids and I deleted them because I wasn't. There's a lot of stuff to cover, and I wanted to address a few things with Ligotti, his worldview, or the book is not didactic. It's a fascinating book. Probably one of my favorite nonfiction books that was written by someone who's still alive. I guess that's the category for that, but the I'll discuss the ramifications of what this kind of thought brings up and some of my own views. Right? He's talking about early humanity. I'm not gonna say proto-humanity, I guess, because they were all humans, Neanderthals, others. We're the ones that won out for now. Right? Talking about looking up in the night sky filled with stars, feeling small and fragile in the vastness. I've actually felt that in New Mexico. There were so many stars in the sky, you felt like you were going to be drawn up into them. Small and fragile, but it was a wonderful experience. Actually, it was seductive. Okay, it was sublime. Right. When they found one of their own lying still and stiff, they now stood around the body as if there was something they should do that they had never done before. It was then that they began to take bodies that were still and stiff to distant places, so they could not find their way back to them. But even after they had done this, some within their group did see those bodies again, often standing silent in the moonlight, or loitering sad faced just beyond the glow of a fire. Okay? That's interesting. The idea of seeing the dead come back, the sad face, the fact that they knew that they wanted to get rid of the bodies that were still in stiff. Okay, for of course there was reasons of disease which they didn't know, but they knew the dead having them around wasn't good, and also the idea that they were staring at what was going to be their fate. Very touching little passage here. Um, do you want me to tell you my grim view? Right? Uh, it's just all we are carriers of DNA. We're just DNA replicators. Okay, living, fauna. We have the male and female to try to minimize the mutations and increase the selections for greater fitness or whatever. But that's all we are. Right? There's other systems of DNA replication. We're actually dealing with, we're always dealing with it, but there's one, particularly in current events right now. There's other forms of DNA replication that instead inject their DNA into other cells and reproduce within. Okay? And they were around before us. So just like the invertebrate against the vertebrates in the ocean of millions of years ago, the different DNA replication systems are at war. And that's all we are. Everything we want, every hope we have is just that carrying on a baton that uses you up and drops you as soon as it can, and maybe keeps you around just so you can suffer. And that is really the whole theme of there's something, the Schopenhauer quote, there's something behind the world that is pernicious, or something pernicious behind the scenes that makes a nightmare of a world, is the exact quote. The suffering, the disappointment. Schopenhauer talked about that. That all you fight and strive and struggle for a goal. When you finally attain it, it's meaningless. It's the old journey, not the destination. But most people can't deal with that. So the disappointment of life, the suffering of life, the even worse horrors of losing people you have, of being crippled, of being helpless, of pain, constant pain. All right, let's not get too negative for where we're going here. I like how I brought up this guy, Edgar Saltis. I've actually read this Philosophy of Disenchantment. I haven't read The Anatomy of Negation, but the great writer, he makes a point that other people are going to make with this pessimistic philosophy, is that the only hope is that humanity will cease to breed and we will all go into oblivion. All right? See, I'm trying to organize this a little bit. Ugliness. Well, I'll go back to that in a second. There's something I wanted to bring up how you deal with these things, how you manage this ultimate problem, because you don't really solve problems. You won't solve this problem. You just manage it. Okay? Let's see. All right. Yeah, this Benatar thing. Now, this is where the antinatalism comes in. It's sort of the logical conclusion of if you think life is better to not be born than to have children is worse than committing any kind of crime. So we have this South African philosopher of ethics, David Benatar. I wonder if he still lives in South Africa. Interesting. You could well anyway. Let me stay on focus here. This is going to like this morality and ethics, which is always interesting to bring up. Reminds me of like Mali and the non-aggression principle and all that. Extent of harm occurs. It doesn't matter what extent. Once harm has been ensured by the beginning of a bundle of joy, a line has been crossed from moral ethical behaviors to immoral unethical behavior. Obviously, not only is this a dead end, a cul-de-sac, but I really don't like where this goes. You already had the problem of morals and ethics without any basis. Well, we know what all the basis of this is. The basis of all modern Western moral and ethics is Christianity. They're all coming from that, regardless of what you feel about it, negated or not. They're all coming from this, and they're coming to conclusions of this that literally seek oblivion. Okay, now I was bringing up the Neanderthals and the European sense of constantly being nomadic, shaped in an ice age. And you notice it's been really rainy a lot, and all diseases are popping up again. I wonder if we're due. I think we are, but staying on focus again. The seeking thing within the European, looking beyond the veil. This is kind of eating itself. It's tied into consciousness. But the whole problem I have with the obvious thing here of antinatalism and what it means is that, once again, what I brought up in the first video is this only applies to whitey. Okay? Even Ligotti won't say that. And it's fine. He doesn't have to. That's not what he's trying to do. If you could even argue, if everyone agreed not to reproduce, then the whole world would go into oblivion. That actually might have some merit in a very weird, totally isolated area. But no one's going to do that. In fact, many of the people pushing these sort of things are not these guys. People who would like that to happen, well, it doesn't apply to them, right? Whether they're elites or otherwise. So, the issue with that antinatalism, it's like MGTOW. It's a dead end. It's understandable, but you carry on. Now, he brings up something here where he mentions the tragic pessimists. And this is going to link to where I start bringing up some other ways of looking at this. Right? Tragic humanism, where you have pessimists here. But they're basically saying you still got to give it your all, your best. They're sort of halfway. Well, the way I've looked at it, there's about 4 ways you can deal with this stuff here, right? The first thing, it goes back to the pagan worldview, which Christianity pretty much slowly obliterated over time, is that life is tragic. Life is not supposed to be happiness and materials. Life is agony. The gods hate you, and your job is to fight on. That's the Aryan kind of mentality, but not just the Aryan. You fight on. You're supposed to fight the gods, okay? It's tragic. That's what life is. That's sort of part of it, what you see in the ancient Greek, the stories, the history, and the tragedy, the tragic dramas they had, going all throughout European experience, whether it's Italian opera or even some of the other things, dramatic Shakespearean theater. Life is tragic. Okay? Life is, it's not supposed to be good. Okay? Another way to deal with it kind of goes back to something he has here. Does a link. Hold on a second. Let's see. We go. Well, he brings up William James, brother of Henry James, positivism, where he brings up, and who's that? Evola? Who is that guy? Is life worth living? Well, he says, and this is something that I came to the conclusion of years ago without even reading any of this stuff. No logic can support it. Logic defeats all feeling that life is worth living. If, like I said in another video, if you only base life purely on reason, which is what they've been trying to do for 300 years, okay, you will come to the conclusion eventually that there is no reason to exist, that life is a horror, right? Like the Nietzsche, the beyond, the birth of tragedy, the daemon of one of the philosophers saying it's better to never have been, right? You come to that conclusion, which is interesting because the empiricism and philosophy derived from these same ancient people. Never did were any of these Greeks, which you would call atheists. They believed in cosmic forces. Okay, so the two are not mutually exclusive, but we know what's been going on. I can also argue, as a very mundane example, in the last 4 years, you're starting to see that reason and rationality is not that important, right? It's not something you throw away. It's something you need to use in your life. It's useful, but it's not as useful as you might think, and it's not the only thing. As you see around you, the masses of people are not moved by reason. They've been lying for 4 years about something, about a certain political person, working with an evil country. You've seen they've done that nonstop. So reason and rationality is not that important on the list. And there's mysteries. There's things that you will never know. Ligotti can even never know that he's right or wrong, or that things are like this. He even admits it in there. There's the one thing that the ultimate reason being put in its place, just like the merchant class should be put in its place, right? Is that you're never going to know this stuff. There's mysteries. Man wasn't meant to know things. And that's okay. It shouldn't leave you feeling, destroyed or afraid. It's okay. It's all right. Even Schopenhauer, the big atheist, had dialogues about that, where religion had a purpose, metaphor, for the masses of people. You couldn't tell them outright that life has no meaning and there's no God, because when you do that, you get what you have now. You get the being has concealed itself from us, like Heidegger says. Although he blames Socrates, but you know how that goes. But yeah, you know what? Be a little more irrational in your life, because that's about as real as any rational thing as you can see. Okay. Another way to a basic practical thing is that taking stuff like this to a grim conclusion, it doesn't, as simple as it is, it doesn't serve you. Okay, this is number 3. It doesn't, to take this stuff to heart and go apply it, or to just give up. How does that serve you? Okay, it doesn't serve you at all. MGTOW, it's understandable, it doesn't serve you. Antinatalism, it's understandable, it doesn't serve you. It serves other people, I can tell you that. It serves your rivals. It serves the elites that hate you. Okay, so like I said, at the end, all this stuff doesn't serve you. It serves you to be strong, to try to do these things, to try to create, and to use whatever you need to do to go forward in a world that is tragic, and in a world where reason and rationality is at its end point. Okay? And the last thing I'll add in order to manage this sort of thing, okay? I mean, there's actually a 5th one, but I'll go to the another one. Humor, laugh, right? You should laugh at these things. Humor makes this stuff. It's the flip side of tragedy. Humor always is fun. You might as well laugh and get the last laugh. And that ties into the last thing, which is, if there was no other reason to want to continue and exist, or to see existence as what it is, like I said with the Edgar Saltis thing, all of humanity will go into oblivion. But they're not. Okay, the only people going into oblivion, or that they want to go into oblivion, is your pale ass. So there's no better reason, knowing that there's people, okay, that hate you, elites and whatnot, that hate you. Okay, the thing they would hate the most, the thing they love the most, is if you get hooked on OxyContin and kill yourself and drink yourself to death and whatnot. Spite, yeah. Continue out of spite for these sons of bitches, because you going forward, being strong, smiling, and having kids, and conveying your things, your thoughts, and what you think should be. They hate that. Okay, that drives them insane. So if there's one reason out of all to read this and still enjoy it and still continue despite what's the ramifications. The power of spite. Fuck the bastards. Very intellectual, I know. Okay, later.